Clive. He has 24 years service as a coal miner, so if anybody in this room knows how it's done, then it's going to be Clive. And Clive's going to look at the origins, the beginnings of mining in this area, and I think a little bit further afield perhaps as well, just to get it in context. And Clive's specialism is getting out on the ground with friends to actually look at the remains, which is, from my background as an archaeologist, is always a treat. Anyway, so let me introduce Clive Seal.
Oh, thank you, Sam. Well, if I still get a clap at the end, then I've done all right. Obviously,
no clap in the middle.
No clap in the middle. I'll chuck a fish. Obviously, me and Graham are going to overlap quite a little bit. So if we go off a little bit, it's just so you know I'm not repeating Graham's information. Can you hear us at the back? Okay, is that all right? Yeah. And also, I did have a couple of little videos for you to watch, but sadly, technology and they're not working. So I'm going to have to fill in a little bit where the videos were, but I'll tell you about them as much as I can. But it's my job really to introduce you to actual coal mining in the area, not just, but specifically in the Holbank Gate area, but I will just go outside a little bit to give a little bit of context. So when did it first begin? Well, nobody knows. We know very little about early mining. A lot of it is conjecture. And little scraps of information that we've found. So, did the Romans mine coal? Well, apparently there is evidence of cinders along the Roman wall and in some of the castles, but there's no definitive evidence anywhere of them actually mining coal. So does that mean that they didn't? No, it just means that we haven't found any holes that you can attribute to a Roman. But then when you think coal mining, it's an extractive industry. It's constantly destroying itself. So if the Romans, if they did do anything, it would be along the outcrops, where in later generations and in industrial disputes, where other people would have gone. And they would have destroyed anything that was remaining. So it's a question we just don't know. But they did go through at least 7 outcrops, making the maiden way in Lamlek, and they were actually here for minerals, so maybe they did, maybe they didn't. So the first recorded pinpoint we've got is through research that Bruce has done, it's not research that I've done, and that takes us to the year 1640. And I've got to get this guy's name right because, you know, you remember things. Well, I'm remembering Walrus. But he was called Walter de Wind. Not Walrus de Wind, Walter de Wind. And he gifted some of his lands to Naworth Abbey. Well, to the priory, sorry. But he retained the right to farm and to keep mining coals. So obviously then, he had been mining coals prior to 1240. Now let's think of that name, Walter de Wind. Wind. The first colliery along Coalfield is called Wind Gates. The Old Norse word for yate is yat. It used to be called Wind Yat, Wind Gate. So his Wind Gate's named after Walter de Wind. In all possibility it is. Now let's just explore that idea that the priory were now mining coal, because a lot of tales, old men's tales, whenever they found old workings in the 17th and 1800s, oh, monks have been in, it's where monks were at. Now if your granddad tells you that's where the monks were, then your dad tells you that's where the monks were, you believe that's where the monks were. And somebody like me is not going to alter what you think because your granddad's told you. But we have to think of this rationally. I was talking to somebody last year who worked at Blenkinsop, and they'd come across old workings that monks had been in, and we looked at them from the 1700s. So to what extent the monks who were clerics, by the way, at Lanercost, they weren't getting around dirty. they probably leased it out, but to what extent, we don't know. But not every hole that has been found and attributed to the monks' workings is actually from the monks. It's possibly from the 15, 16, 1700s, but we never will know. Right, it looks a bit of a codgy drawing, looks like I've been playing at home, but believe it or not, this is off the proper colliery plan. It's off the 1835 plan, and it's just a section of it that shows the whole of this area of the coalfield. And basically they've taken a slice out to show you a little section of the strata. Now I'm aiming this at with the idea that people know very little about the strata and geology, you know, to make it easier. As you can see, the strata is set, go back to basics, it's like a sponge cake. So the coal is like the jam in the middle. And that's the coal along Tindale Fell, the little limestone coal that how Graham described it. And these areas here, I've got a pointer, I don't know what am I doing that for. Those areas there are faults.
Use your fingers.
I know, I'll use my fingers, yeah. Sorry, it's half a comedy show, don't worry. Just don't sing and join in. They're faults. Now what a geological fault is where there's been a massive pressure on the earth, and the earth has actually moved. And so what it has done, it's displaced the coal seam. So where the little limestone coal seam is there, there's two faults there, a trough, that becomes known as a trough fault. Can you see it's changed its place in the strata? Pardon me. There above Bishop Hill, near the limestone quarries. Then we get the other side of Tindale village, and the little limestone coal, can you see how steep it goes down? Yeah, that's towards the Rochburn area. So a little bit to the north, we're at Rochburn Farm, and you'll all know where Rochburn Colliery is, I'm hoping. You can still see the big wall there. Well, the strata was the same on the Rochburn side. And the little limestone goes really deep down, right all the way to Hotwhistle, Greenhead Bank, we're at Outcrops there, where it was worked at Byron, then right up onto the Roman wall, up to Fell End, and Barkham Collieries up there. So again, the Romans were digging up there. They possibly came across coal, well they would have come across coal outcrops while they were constructing the wall and the vallum. Now the other side of Tindale, if you will, at Wood End, as you're going up Prior Bank, another set of coals appear. These are the limestone coals, which the old men called the limestone coals. They're within the limestone strata. And when you're climbing up Prior Bank towards Midshorn, we get what the old men call the true coals. The coals that you find within Millstone Grit, that you get in Newcastle and Durham, the North East Coalfield. They're a lot better quality, there's 7 workable seams in them, and they were the prize. And you'll find them all the way up from Prior Bank, Midshorn, across the other side of the Tyne, Coalwood, right across to Argyll House, more or less, the other side of Coalwood. Then there's a fault, and they run across where the Plenmellow open cast was, and then again they disappear until they get to Stubley near Langley, and you can still see Stubley Colliery. They were the prize. These were okay, but the owners were really after those coals, and sadly there isn't much of them. It's a narrow strip that's less than half a mile in north to south, over maybe 4 or 5 miles of a length. But we're concentrating on the on the little limestone coals on Tindale Fell and on Coal Fell. Just give it a tap,
Left or right?
Space bar.
Space bar?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, right.
This is off the geological survey that was done in 1932 by Trotter and Hollingworth. You can get it online. It tells all about the area geologically, the coalfield. And specifically, we're looking at the little limestone coals. As Graham said, there's 3 different coals within the limestone, all with varying qualities. At Blenkinsop and also at the Howard above Tindale, they all come together and form 1 foot, 6 foot thick. 1 coal, 6 foot thick. Through the rest of the area, it varies. The area we're going to look at is this, where the Coal Fell is, and the Tindale Fell colliery is there. And it's round about 4 foot 6. Decent quality actually. The Howard, which came to rework the Coal Fell area in 1875, was really good coal. and they were still selling coal in Carlisle called Naworth Coal in the 1930s, even though the pit had been shut for nearly 40 years because they were going off the name, you see, the name meant quality. As we get towards the gears, which is coming up here, Black Syke and the gears, Town Monmouth, the quality drops off because the coal actually becomes semi-anthracite, which, when I say the quality drops off, to some extent it gets better, but you treat anthracite in a different way. In fact, they didn't work coal very much up in the Geltsdale area, the old men, because they said the quality is no good. And the gears was actually selling as, it was advertised as anthracite coal. And then we get to the Alston area where it is actually anthracite, or to be pedantic, semi-anthracite. So the old people, the old men, right back to the 1200s were interested in this area. Coalfell is called Coalfell for a good reason, because that's where the coal was. And if you're not from the area we're speaking about, as we go along the A689 to Alston, you see the Rochburn Memorial. You might think it's a war memorial. That is the beginning of the Coalfell. That area is Coalfell. And the old road to Midjome and then on towards Alston runs up through that area. So it's no accident the road's there, because there was, there was coal to bring down the road. Hey, it works. Hold your horses. Now this is a LiDAR picture. I don't know if many of you are familiar with LiDAR. It's a wonderful technology that shows us things just under the soil. And this is the Coalfell area. That's where the memorial is. There's the road going up, and there's the Alston Road, cottages. And we've just come a little bit further along there. There's the road going up towards Greenside Farm, the woods, and again the Alston Road. Now can you see all the different old shafts everywhere? Yeah, now that's just one little piece of it. Now if we carry the picture on right up the fell, it is literally full. It's like a colander.
The bell pits.
We'll get to that.
Oh, sorry.
But that's a good question. No, it's because people perceive it as bell pits. People would look at that, Graham's already touched on it, as looking at it as bell pits. And this is where my videos came in. Sadly, aren't working. Now bear in mind that has been worked since at least the 1200s, on and off. We've got that date in 1240 and another date there in 1485, if I remember rightly. Again, this is Bruce's research, where Dacre has said that his pits are more or less closed, they're useless on Tindale Fell because of the Scots. The Scots are invading, and you've got the Border Reivers. So you've got a unique coalfield that is being invaded right from the word go. Lancashire coalfield didn't get invaded. There weren't marauding Yorkshiremen coming across, pinching our coal. You've got Manchester people coming across now pinching our houses, but that's a different thing. I've come up here and pinched your houses, haven't I? And your shops. So you've got a coalfield that's really going to struggle to develop because of the political situation. And throughout the 14, 15, 1600s, the Coalfell colliery is mentioned continuously. Sometimes it's running, it's working, other times it's laid in. It's situated on the Coalfell or on Temple Garth. The brook that actually runs along the bottom is the boundary between Coalfell or Wingates and Temple Garth. So we are going to come back and concentrate on this area a little bit later on. You can just see the outline of some buildings. This is going to take you to the 1700s. But in those early years, we were up here on the fell with all these different pits up there that were working there. And that's just two of them. You could say that they're bell pits. You know, they look like bell pits. So we're going to look at a few different areas. Technology, for a start. What was the early technology? Well, they were learning as they went along, weren't they? And the first pits, obviously, I used to have a big beef against bell pits, being a miner myself. If you've got to dig even 30 feet down, I will go in your garden tomorrow, start a hole, creating the soil till you come to the rock. So you're going to go to all that trouble just to dig out at the bottom, and it fall in, bury your bury your pick and shovel, and maybe even bury you. And then start digging another 30 feet down. It wouldn't take you long to think there's got to be a better way, would it? But bell pits do exist. They've been found, they've been uncovered while we've been mining. All the building work that's going on now around East Lancashire and Burnley, they've been uncovered. And also there used to be a practice, I haven't discovered it up here, but certainly back in East Lancashire and places like that, where if you were a tenant to the Lord of the Manor, you had the right to dig your own coal. Not to sell, but for your own use. So you'll see, that LiDAR picture I showed you, there's one near Burnley that's exactly the same, full of these shafts. And it's because each individual tenant has had the right to dig his own coal. And at some point, somebody's probably thought, let's get together and join. And so that cuts out the need to keep digging down the different shafts.
Two kinds of mine were used. One was sunk into an outcrop of coal from the surface. It was known as a bell pit because of its shape. The other was a drift mine, driven into the hillside or river bank where the coal seam emerged. The bell pits were sunk where the seam lay only a few yards below the surface. One man, a pitman as he was already called, would dig out the coal with a helper, usually his wife, to fetch and carry. The pits were crude with no supports. As much coal as possible was hewn before the sides threatened to cave in. The pit would then be abandoned and another started nearby. One of the ancient laws of the Forest of Dean had fixed that a second pit should be at a distance to which a miner could throw a shovel full of rubbish from the pit he had worked out.
Nine centuries of coal, it's called. And when you watch it, just in your mind, think of the coal fell or Midge-Own bottoms, and you can just picture how it was done. Because they didn't have tubs with wheels. We had sleds. As Graham said, with iron runners on them. This is an actual sled that was uncovered. Well, it goes back, we think, to the 1790s. East Lancashire comes from Lord Byron's collieries. Now, this is a cultural thing. Up here, we've found no evidence of women mining. There's no records at all of women being in the coal pits. That doesn't mean to say that they weren't going right the way back, but certainly in industrial times there was no women. This coalfield takes on its characteristics from the North East coalfield. Northumberland and Durham. It doesn't take its characteristics from the West Cumbria, even though that's Cumbria. All its history, if you will, is associated with the North East, all its working practices. So you can maybe thank the North Eastern handicapped, misogynist guys for the fact that there's no ladies working underground, because there just is no record of them at all. But in Lancashire there is. And this lady was actually a coal pit. We don't call them putters back at home, we call them drawers, because you're drawing the coal along. She actually was a drawer. Not in this photograph, she's dressed up as she would have done in her younger days, because it was outlawed in 1st of January 1843. But basically, she's got a thick belt on, usually leather, with a chain, which would go between her legs and be attached to the front of the sled. Children would do it as well, so up here it would be children. And literally, they would drag the car, the basket, and the sled through the workings. And as Graham has said, you can't really drag it too far. Because coal production is not about how quick the coal hewer can produce the coal. It's about how quick that coal can be taken away from the coal face and got up to pit bank. So the man, the ewer, might be able to hew 4 ton. But if you can only get 2 ton away from him that day, that's the only production there's going to be. So the idea of having the shaft as close to the working coal face as possible leads us to multiple shafts, rather than people saying, it's a bell pit. No, it's done in a systematic way. And we might have different rows down the hillside of shafts as the technology in pumping has advanced, because your second big obstacle is water. So you've got transport underground, water and bad air. You've got to get rid of the water. And the way of getting rid of the easiest way is to drive a straight tunnel into the hillside and let it come out. A Waterloose or a sough, which is what occurred around here. Then you get to a certain depth and you can't have a Waterloose anymore. You have to start pumping. And that is what we're going to come into next. Like I say, that's an actual coal hewer. He's in about 2 foot 6 of coal. Is he? No, maybe 2 foot. That is not a photograph, obviously, but it was sketched in 1841. So it's as good as a photograph. And it was done in Lord Ashley's report into child labour underground. That's in Rochdale. If you notice, he's stark naked. Not because it's hot, because it's a fashion. And that's what disturbed a lot of people when the newspapers landed on their middle class breakfast tables in the 1840s showing naked men and women underground working. They were as much appalled by that as they were the fact that women and children were underground. And if you notice as well, I think this is a Lancashire thing, that there on his shoulder, it's a big scar. He was a clog fighter. Clog fighting, up here you've got your Cumberland and Westmoreland wrestling, haven't you, where you get your falls. Back home it was tucking and purring. Similar thing, you'd grab hold of each other, but you wouldn't have the suits on, you'd be totally naked by a pair of clogs. And it was all in, you just punched each other till somebody dropped, basically. And he was a champion clog fighter. Anyway, that's how underground transport was done. Just to explain why we haven't got the video. By the late 1600s, Coalfield Colliery was taking a change. It was becoming more of an established commercial colliery, and as Graham said, it was leased by a man by the name of Mo. First of all, in the late 1600s, it was called Mowbray. It could have been John or George. John was George's father. John was from the Steel over in Hexhamshire near Tindale. He was a yeoman, but it's very close to the smelt mill there. And then George certainly took over the pit in the early 1700s. So was he running the pit using coal to take the lead smelting? Because George was also agent or engineer at the Allendale and Allenheads lead mines. So what was the pit like when he had it? And sadly, I haven't got my video. Now, do you recognise the main road? Running along, you've got Greenside Farm there. We've got the little beck there, which is the boundary between Wingates on one side and Templegarth on the other. You've just got Templegarth cottage or house just out of shot there. Now, I mentioned pumping. by this time, the pit was too deep for just to drive a level to let the water out. We had to sink a shaft. Now, the Naworth Coalfield is backward. It's not very technologically advanced. There's not a lot of investment. If you go across to Whitehaven in 1740, they've got a shaft there on the seashore over 400 feet deep with a Newcomen engine and they're mining out under the sea. In this area, even up to the early 1800s, the maximum down they could pump was 8 fathoms, which is 46, 48 feet, with a water wheel powered pump. We could have had a steam engine, but that investment was never put in until 1821. So the way that they worked it then was by a water wheel powered pump, which was situated here. So that shaft is a maximum of 48 feet deep. In fact, it is 46, 48 feet deep, the maximum pumping depth. And luckily, we have a full engineer's report on the Coalfield colliery in the 1720s, which tells us all the details we need to know about it, how deep it is, how much coal it is expected to produce, and all the costings. But the coal winding shaft is 108 feet deep. Now it can't be, the bottom of the shaft can't be any deeper than the bottom of that shaft, because that's your water level. So where's the Coalfield winding shaft if it's 108 feet deep? Well, it has to be up on the hill. That's where it has to be, amongst all those other shafts. So to actually locate that shaft is going to be more or less an impossibility. But we can locate this and have located it. You can see here a bit of a mark. That's where the tail race is for the water wheel for the water. They actually took water across the beck in wooden troughs to drive a water wheel on this side, where they worked coal there on the Temple Garth side. That wasn't quite as deep. It was about 10 fathoms less. And we don't have a clue where the coal winding shaft was for that one. So you can still see that. Now this is an estate plan which Bruce sent us, and I forget the exact date of this. Bruce, can you remember? It's
1745?
Thereabout, yeah. So if we look, it actually shows the water wheel. Here we've got the road. There's the brook, the beck, Temple Garth Cottage. The main road would be up there, and there we have a shop, which is a building where the gin would have been, the pump, and there's the water wheel. So that actually appears on an estate plan. And this is interesting because this patch of ground is let to 5 colliers. But what it doesn't show where the winding shaft was. So looking at it from the air, I've turned that upside down now, so there we've got Coalfield, the little beck there in Temple Garth. And each arrow is exactly like for like. So that is where the shaft is, the access road coming away. The other arrows are from later workings where the Howard colliery was. So we can still see these shafts, I'm sorry for me shaking, we can still see them. And some of them, like I say, they'll go back to the 1200s up on the fell. It's amazing the history that is still there. So we're looking at it now from up above. This is the road up to Greenside, which was the old main road to Midgholm, obviously. And the winding shaft would have been one of these up here. There's a pumping shaft. There's a shaft there at Temple Garth. And the water level would have come across here. You can still see some depressions in the field of shafts. And it makes sense that they would wind the coal up next to the main road as well, doesn't it? Yeah, so it is interesting, is the old Coalfield. Again, you can see some of the shafts at Temple Garth. We can't really interpret them. There's 4 holes. The jury's still out which is which. What is actually a shaft, where the water wheel would be, and where the bog was. Now underground, even though we've got an engineer's report, there's no actual plans of how they work Coalfield colliery. But he does tell us the direction that things run. And being an anorak, I've tried to put that onto paper. Now this is the last plan of the Naworth Colliery, which I said closed in the 1890s. Now, going back to when Mowbray had the Coalfield Colliery, one of the clauses was that he had to maintain the waterways. He hadn't to rob any coal, let the waterways in at all. Because then when he finished, he could lease the colliery to somebody else. But Naworth Colliery broke into the old workings. And it's interesting what they found. The folklore is that the old Coalfield Colliery actually flooded and one guy was drowned. Now, I can't find any newspaper references, nothing, it's just a folk tale. But the old colliers reckon when they broke in from the Howard, they found a board, a wooden board, with what looked like hair at one end and like a decomposed mass. No skeleton though. So whether there's truth in that tale that they did, actually that one man was drowned and the colliery flooded, we don't know. There's a line of shafts, there's a shaft down near where the water wheel was, so I've made in conjecture what I think was the winding shaft. The blue is water level, the red are the headings, rising from there to there at 1 in 10, and they would drive boards off. So that's how I think they actually worked the old colliery, when called up these shafts. And on the Temple Garth side, exactly the same. Only conjecture, we've never found where the Temple Garth winding shaft was. We probably never will. But that's how the old pit was kind of worked. Right, it carried on, as I say, till at least 1835. The way they worked it, there's a good book called The Complete Collier, if you get, which was produced in the 1700s, and basically it was a guide for landowners finding coal on their land and how to exploit it and what to do. And it's a blueprint for what would have happened. So each hewer was basically expected to hew a score of coal a day, a score of corves. Now Graham's gone into the different weights and measures. A hewer can hew usually between 2.5, 3, 4 tonne, depending on the coal and its nature. But what we don't know is the size of the corves, again, at Coalfield. The report says that there were 44 corves to a score. What the hewers would say 22 to a score. So they were small corves then. They were half the size of what a normal corve should be. Because don't forget, somebody's dragging them, so they can only drag a certain weight. That's what's going to determine the size of the corve. Now last week I came across an old document from 1807 in Rosendale Valley that talked about the corves that we used there, and it gave measurements. And I'm not saying it's the same as up here, but it was a maximum that somebody could pull down there. And the corve, or basket, was 30 inches long by 20 inches wide and 10 inches deep. Bearing in mind that coal seam was only a yard. But that was as much as that kid or that woman could drag. So was it something similar up here? We just don't know. But each year was to hew at least a score a day, and that carries on right through the history of, I won't say to the present day, but till they stopped hewing in tons in the 50s, a score. And there was 22 corves to the score at Coalfield. We'd say, but a score's only 20. Well, they had to fill 2 for nothing, because that paid for the candles and tools. So you were filling 2 a day for nothing. And from the production, it looks like they had at least 6 hewers there at the Coalfield Colliery. So you get an idea on paper of what production was like. Right, George Mowbray gave up, as we say, sometime around 1835 perhaps, and we get the collieries go back into the hands of the Howards. And again, we've still got a bad political situation, because we've got some people across the border that think that this land is their land. And in 1747, they come and try and claim it. So with that in mind, and still you've got your border reavers and so forth, you can see why the coalfield still hasn't really developed, because who's going to invest? And that invasion in 1747, let's face it, it's here, it's on our doorstep, isn't it? It must have had an effect. I'm not saying to what extent, but it had an effect. And after that time, when we got the unification of the country, then everything seemed to really take off. Graham mentioned the date that Trotter and Hollingwood say 1747. But again, we can't find anything until the 1850s. But this is your Lord Carlisle at the time. He looks like a real pitman, doesn't he? This is Charles. And he's the, I've been practicing this all day, I think he's the third Earl. Third, fourth, fifth. I think he's the third Earl, Charles. Now, like I said, there's not a great deal of investment like there is for Lord Lowther's land over in Whitehaven. But there is investment. Lord Carlisle actually goes in business to lease some of the lead mines up in Alston Moor. He goes in with the Duke of Bridgewater, believe it or not. So he has got industrial, you know, he's invested in industry, and possibly he is using this local coal as well now that he is developing, or his agents are developing, for his own smelting. Can't say that for sure, but it perhaps is. But his real interest, like most of ours, is politics. The liberal politicians, aren't they? The industry comes second to that. Apparently he got involved with the pirates as well. I'm not really much into my noblemen, but history sadly is written more about the nobles, isn't it? I haven't got a picture of the, if he's the third, the fourth Earl. I can't find a picture of the fourth Earl at all, who went more deeper into the mining, but I've got a picture of his wife, or his second wife, and she's one of the Byrons. She was William Lord Byron's sister. Yeah, William Byron is the uncle of George Gordon Byron, the poet. So I have a bit of interest in them, not because of the poets, but because of Rochdale. Because they were actually, believe it or not, Lord of the Manor for Rochdale. And there was a big court case with the poet in the early 1800s.
Linking socks had a Byron terrace, didn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah, well, maybe that's to do with up here, I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, well, Byron. Yeah, so the names generally do end up being used, don't they? So he married Lady Byron. I'm going with this now.
Sorry.
Yeah, she was the daughter of the sister of William Byron, the fifth Lord Byron, who was known as the Devil Byron, and he murdered another nobleman, William Charworth, but he didn't murder him, he killed him in a duel. He got him into a darkened room and pulled a sword before the other guy had time to get his sword out. And that was done in the Star and Garter in London. And there was a big court case held in the House of Lords about it. And it's online, you can read the court case. And he got away with it. They all found him, at least 13 of his peers found him not guilty. But I think what they were trying to do was keep the, what's the word? The fact that you can duel going. You know what I'm saying? If they'd have found him guilty, they probably would have come against getting him stopped duelling, if you know what I mean. So that's why they found him not guilty. After he'd been found not guilty and escaped the chopping block, if it had been two viewers off this coalfield and one had killed the other, they'd have been swinging from the gibbet, wouldn't they? But he was away and he went abroad to celebrate with his wife and his in-laws, Lord Carlisle and his wife. And they went on the Raz all over Europe. But I like connections like that. I love when I can, especially when I can connect East Lancashire with up here, because obviously it brings things home to me. I'm not such an incomer after all. And that is the fifth Earl, who is the Earl when the waggonway is developed. He actually becomes guardian to the poet Byron, believe it or not, who pays him back by lampooning him in a poem. So that is the guy, when you talk about Lord Carlisle and the waggonway, who is in charge at the time. Right, we've left Coalfield, we're briefly going to go on to Townhouse, because I know I'm running out of time through waffling. Through the 18th, when Lord Carlisle takes control of the estates again, they're mining themselves. They've already still been mining, by the way, in Mitchell since the 1730s at least. And coal has been coming down the old road. It's been quite scaled out mid-zone bottoms. It's one of my hobbies, is the mid-zone bottoms. So the coal mining isn't just down here, it's up there as well, but obviously we're concentrating down here. And we're mining, as Graham said, coal that outcrops along Tindale Fell. The arrows actually are drifts. A drift is a tunnel driven into the hill. The white lines are faults, and the black lines are basically where the coal outcrops. You can see it's all at different levels where the coal has, where the faults have come in. So originally then, they come across, when Graham said, they come across towards Low Pit. And we've got that date for 1750. But there's a difference between here and the Coal Fell. Can you remember what we're talking about haulage? You need a lot of different shafts to bring the coal up, so you haven't got a bottleneck on the haulage. Well, we kind of haven't got that here, because if we look at the fell, not the best shot, I do apologise. This is a little cabin that is left from the Venture pit from the 1930s. So there's Hogle Cottages. We're coming up the Gers Railway here. That is the track of the waggonway running up Tindale Fell. And this is where the waggonway's first location is, where the coal is up there. But look at the fell, how steep it is. So you drive a tunnel into the hill with your sleds, you're not going to get very far before you need a shaft. Oh, how many 100 feet deep is that shaft going to be? And how are you going to get a road up to it? So can you see the bottleneck that's going to be on Tindale Fell for a start? So they don't go very far, and if you look at old plans, you see this big area where there's no workings. There are workings, it's just that they're ancient, so they can only go a certain distance. So I think most of the activity for a certain time is up on Talking Fell. So if we go up on Talking Fell, look how different it is, how much flatter it is. Now the thing about Townhouse as well, and Talking, different to Coal Fell, the coal rises from the surface in. So water naturally flows away, you don't need to pump. So you don't go down the pit, you go up the pit. So all Talking Fell is drained from water levels that come out near Forest Head on the Forest Head to Talking Road. And as they advance, the workings get farther away, they can sink different shafts up the fell, and the water still drains naturally out into those water levels, you see. And so that is one of the shafts up on Talking Fell. That's the Dove Pit, which was sunk around about 1803, and believe it or not, that's 300 feet deep. But it doesn't matter, because now they've got horse chains, they've got the capacity to wind a lot of coal up. I should have put a picture of a horse chain up, but again, it was part of the video. And also, as they progress along with the shafts, they make roads. It's suitable for making roads up Talking Fell, and you can connect it to places like Castle Carrick. So if you go a walk over Talking Fell, you'll come across these old shafts all the way up to the old Green's cottage, and then down to the River Gelt. And that's what it looked like underground in 1799. These are the water levels coming out at Forest Head. Havana, many of you will know about the Duke Pit in the 1950s and the Havana. Well, the Havana was the reopening of the old water level back to the early mid-1700s. And they've sunk a series of shafts all along here. But what they've got now, as Graham talked about, they're not dragging on sleds, they've got wheels. So the tubs now are on wheels. So they can get further, they can push tubs further, they can use horses underground, but the putters can put an awful lot further because now they're not dragging sleds. But just one thing about being a putter and what it's like being underground. People think, the coal face, that's the hardest job. The hardest job underground, in my estimation, is being a putter or a drawer. If you're a hewer, it goes in cycles. You undercut the coal, you've seen the pictures of them either laid down or on a cracky, undercutting the coal. And they'd undercut the coal for a depth of about a yard, and their coal face is maybe about 4 foot wide, 5 foot wide. When they'd undercut that coal, they would bore holes and then put explosives, or in the early days, before explosives, they actually put lime into the holes. The way they bored a hole, by the way, for a start, wasn't with a drill, it was with a jumper. which is like a big chisel, but a jumper drill is like a chisel, a long thin one. One man would hold it, and another one would hit it with a hammer. When he'd hit it, pull it out, give it a quarter turn, push it back in, and another throw. That is how you drill the hole. Monotonous, so they maybe got in about, maybe it's a yard. Fill it with lime, put water in, and then that lime would expand, and it would break the coal off in big lumps, because they don't want small coal. Small coal you're not paid for. It's riddled out, and it's chucked into the old workings, or maybe sent out for lime burning. So you might have used 300, 400, 500 weight of small coal that you're not going to get paid for. You're only going to get paid for the big stuff. And when you send that tub out, if it's not full enough or it doesn't weigh enough, you're not going to get paid for it. And if you're over the northeast and Durham, not only are you not going to get paid for it, you're going to get fined. So you could end up working all day for nothing, literally, for now. In fact, there's an old, if you read Fiennes' history of the miners of Northumberland and Durham, like I say, the society crosses over between here and Northumberland. There's a guy comes out with, I think it's Seguil colliery, and they start at stupid o'clock, by the way. The first shift go down at 4 in the morning. They did up here at the Gairs and places like that, because sometimes they work 4 shifts of hours. So you go down at stupid o'clock, and the 4 shift will come back up to bank about 10. So he comes up to bank, there's this guy at the Seguil pit. His eyes, you can hardly see anything because he's been working by the light of a Davy lamp all day, and he's looking at what's known as a laying out board, which is where they put up whose tubs have been laid out or cancelled. You're not getting paid, you're getting fined. And he said he's squinting and he said, "Hey Sam, what are you looking for?" He says, "I'm looking for what I don't want to see." Which is he didn't want to see any of his tubs marked up there, which meant he'd been fined, thinking he'd perhaps filled a score, but he's only going to get paid for 19, 15, 11, and maybe even know the company. So that's what being a viewer was like. But the putter was different. The putter was also paid by the score, by how many tubs he put. But you were on the go all the time. The viewer's job was slightly different. All right, he was on the go while he was undermining, then he brought the coal down, then he was filling. So his body is going at a different pace all day. The putter, the young lad, is running around like a fly all day with his tail on fire. With that hewer shouting, "Where's my tubs?" Because you're all paid by piecework, you see. There could be trouble on the haulage. His tubs could be coming off the rails because the rails need attention. He hasn't time to do it. So the putter is working like a lunatic all day. Also, he's going around like that all day. But while you're over the tub, it's not too bad. But he might just lift his back up too much, and he's going to catch his back on a roof bar. That's a roof support. And that hurts. Then the day after, you've got a scab. And you're going along the day after, bang! Same bar, same support, same part of your back, and off comes the scab. I'm telling you, it hurts. It really, really. I've been at the back of the tub. The tub's going along and your feet are dragging and you kneel it. There's a 17-year-old crying nearly. It hurts. And you never stop. It's the hardest job I ever did. I did it when I was 17, when I went out the coal board mines into the private mines. And it really is. So the putter's job is about the hardest. And a viewer, like I say up here, was working 6 hours bank to bank, surface to surface. One putter would do 2 shifts of viewers. So when we look at mining disasters, you've heard of the New Hartley disaster in 1862 over in Northumberland, where a beam engine fell down the shaft and entombed everybody. That is why at 10 o'clock in the morning, both shifts were underground. Because the back shift, the afternoon shift, went down the pit about 9:30. And the same thing happened up here. At what period that shift system started up here, I can't say. But certainly in the mid-1800s, that's a shift system that was working up here. So anyway, that's the talk, I'm rattling on, that's the talking colliery as it was. We're now using rails underground, so let's think back to Tarnhouse and some of the dates that Graham gave us. We can get in by now, we don't need to sink extra shafts. to get the coal up, we can lay rails, and we can fully exploit the coal in this area. But if you look where the drifts go in here, there's large areas where it shows no workings. And I think maybe this is partly where they've been in before, maybe where there's been no rails. I could be wrong, it's just a theory, that's all. But you see where they've really opened it up, and Graham talks about them laying rails, haulage ways, pony ways, and this is down as a mother gate. A mother gate is the main way, your main way into the colliery, where perhaps the roof is ripped above coal height, the ponies are in, it's the main artery. Back at home we would call it the main gate. A mother gate is a northeast term. And off the mother gate they would take working boards. Coal is like wood. You get a piece of 3x2, look at it, it has a grain and it has an end. And those that do wood work, it's easier to chisel on the grain and work on the grain than at the end. And coal's exactly the same. It's easier to hew when you're on the full grain of the coal. So you would, to the best of your ability, drive your headings against the grain and take your boards with the grain to make the hewing easier. So as Graham said, we've got now a large area of coal opened up. I don't know how many hewers we've got on. Graham's talked about some of the tonnages that's coming out. We've now got a big industry. We're on the verge of the Industrial Revolution. We've got the Napoleonic Wars going on. Massive demand for coal. And as we've alluded, your production is only as good as your transportation. It's the same even in the most modern colliery today, where they spend billions of pounds. You can spend billions on the coal face, but you've got to spend more on your trunk conveyors to get the coal out. Interestingly, I used to know a mining engineer, pardon me, that worked for Gullick and Dobson. He did a lot of work in India. He'd go out to India for Gullick and Dobson and he'd set up coal faces for them. And they, unlike England, wanted to employ as many men as possible. So he said, you'd set up this £3 million coal face, because I'm going back a few years, that was state of the art. And then at the end of the gate conveyor, the main road, he said, you have these hundreds of people with baskets. Because they wanted to employ as many people as possible. But the production of that coal face was, the machine only worked when the transport was working. So as Graham says, and he's mentioned the number of carts, which is astronomical, it boggles your mind, doesn't it? So we need a railway. We need something. The railways have been on the go, the waggonways. Lord Carlisle's had a waggonway for a lot of years up in one of his market pits. So it is decided, this is the Gears Railway now, it's not the original waggonway. So it was decided to construct this waggonway. And my job really is just to take you that far to where it was constructed to, which is up here. You can see old tramways here. These date from the 1920s. But the shop pit, which is the destination of the original waggonway, is round about here. It's impossible now to find it. There's been so much erosion, all the so-called rewilding, the fells are moving, everything is slowly being destroyed. But we can't find exactly where the shop pit or the low pit was. We just know it's there. So that was your waggonway's destination in 1799, and then it was extended over, and I'm sorry I haven't got the proper picture, over the beck, Hogle Beck, to go up the side of Tindale Fell around about 1803 to serve those pits up there. And to take that story further, it's going to be this afternoon, and that's what Bruce is going to do. So thanks for your time, and I'm sorry for waffling.
Do you want to do the put-in motion again? Oh, seriously?
Seriously?
Yeah, so you cut it here, yeah.
It's a joke, isn't it? It's a forfeit.
Okay, hang on. Okay, now, yeah. Right, okay, and you're going to do it now?
Right, what, like that? That's how you put.
Yeah, up to that.
You got that?
Thank you very much. I was getting nervous now. I'll do it again for the close-ups.
Oh dear.